The car business is rapidly changing, and modern car dealers are meeting the demand. I'm Michael Cirillo, and together we're going to explore what it takes to create a thriving dealership and life in the retail automotive industry. Join me each week for inspiring conversations with subject matter experts that are designed to help you grow. This is the Dealer Playbook. You can learn to effectively negotiate and effectively communicate.
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, a couple of separate issues on the argument, EQ versus IQ. This is an EQ skill, and there are those that argue that we can continue to build our EQ throughout our lives. Daniel Coyle wrote an interesting book called The Talent Code, and Coyle pretty much contends that any skill is learnable if you put in the time. So yeah, you can learn it if you put in the time.
What led you from being in the FBI and doing this successfully for as long as you did to then where you're at now, where you're working with business leaders and businesses and organizations to teach them these skills?
In the process of trying to get better as an FBI hostage negotiator, I wanted to look for other areas to get better from outside of law enforcement. And so I approached the guys at Harvard Law School, the Harvard program on negotiation, and said, hey, you guys want to collaborate? And as far as they were concerned, the hostage negotiators, kind of a singing and dancing monkey. They were happy to come and see if I could sing and dance.
Sure.
And so, I got up there, and brilliant people up there, very smart, pushing negotiation forward. And they were just starting to scratch the surface on emotional intelligence as a negotiation skill. And they said, look, you're doing the same stuff we're doing. It's exactly the same dynamics, problems, issues, stresses. The context is different, but the problems are the same. And so when I went through there as a student, in our exercises, I was slaughtering the Harvard Law School students, which I got no end of pleasure out of that, not being smart enough to ever have gotten into Harvard Law School in the first place. It was, it was a delight. And on top of that, not only were they smarter than me, but I always loved beating lawyers and anything that had to do with words anyway. So there was no shortage of benefits there.
Right. And so, when I think of your book, Never Split the Difference, which we're going to be giving away copies of to those that are listening, stay tuned for the end of the episode. I'm going to tell you how you can get your hands on a copy of that book. But it's really...
Wait a minute, you're not going to charge them? You're going to give them away?
I'm going to give away to loyal listeners. Yes. Can you believe it? Who am I? Who is this guy? I know. Now, we're also going to include a link for those that don't qualify for the free.
All right, very good.
Free copy. Yes. But, one of the things that I love about your book is that it's really, I think of it as this like tactical field guide, because you can almost turn to any page in that book and go, okay, now I'm thinking about this a little bit differently. But you really kind of get a sense of, as I read through the pages, I kind of got a sense of, oh man, there's a lot of things in my business, in my organization, in my communication that I could improve upon. But I'm curious to know from your vantage point, what are, as you're working with all these businesses and speaking and consulting, what are some of the common challenges you see facing that organizations face or businesses face? And maybe one or two things that they could do after listening to this to really go and start improving their situation.
Yeah, well, the most common challenge really is the yes addiction. Like so many people are crackheads for yes. They are just, and it's the only thing they want to hear. And they are scared of hearing anything else. And they're scared to let the other side talk because the other side might say no, or the other side might, it's just crazy. People get so focused on yes, they get complete tunnel vision. One of our sayings, one of the rules that we live by is never be so sure of what you want that you wouldn't take something better. So, well, if you're so focused on yes, you are never going to see anything better. You're going to do your homework. You run all these games in your head. You run rackets in your head. You run all sorts of crazy outcomes in your head. Most of them are negative. And then you just got to talk, you got to pitch. You're really afraid of what the other side has to say. And it's if you can get out of that, your negotiation ability will leap forward exponentially.
Is there such a thing as going too far in the opposite direction where, I mean, you see a lot of businesses and specifically car dealerships, retail dealerships where they're almost a no culture, like nothing is welcome. It's like my way or the highway. Is there too far you can go in that direction? Is there a happy middle ground, or what's your take on that?
That's another version of having tunnel vision, of being inflexible, of being so sure of what you want that you wouldn't take something better.
Right.
So, you got, and one of the realities of the situation, which is hard for a lot of people to realize, is there's always a better deal to be had. There's always a better deal. No matter how smart you are. I mean, Warren Buffett, one of the smartest dudes on the planet, he goes to the table and the first thing he does is shut up. And then he shuts up some more. Because as smart as he is, as much as he reads, as much research as he and his team do, he knows the other side is always in possession of information that he doesn't have. And he wants to find out what it is because he knows it's going to change his calculations. And so that's why the first smart move is to shut up. The other side is dying to talk anyway. Let them talk. Find out what they know. Find out how you can make the deal better.
It kind of reminds me, I think I was watching, and I can't remember what video it was. You were doing a presentation and you were talking about an experience you had walking into a bar with three of your other hostage negotiator colleagues. And there was a guy there that basically said, you're not sitting here, I'm going to beat you up or something like that. And you guys basically turned that entire situation around by just deploying some simple, essentially showing and demonstrating your willingness to listen to this guy. And he just basically became an open book.
Yeah. And first of all, I'm glad you finished that story, because a story of me walking into a bar, those are a lot of stories. You got to get a lot more specific than that.
Well, I'm glad. At first I was like, oh crap, I just killed the punchline. But, I think, I can't remember who said it, but one of the most valuable things I think I've learned in sales is exactly what you just said, which is you have two ears and one mouth, use them proportionately.
Well, and somebody even refined that for me one time fairly recently, and I wish I would have thought this up. But really, you got two ears, two eyes, and a nose. So you should be listening and observing 5 times as much as you talk, not twice as much as you talk, because, they're going to give you visual cues. You read the person's body language while you're talking. And the nose, that's kind of your instinct. I mean, the accumulation of all your senses, your intuition, your observations, the micro cues and clues that you get that you might not be completely aware of them in the moment, but you're starting to get a gut instinct feeling. And so, you should really, really start to rely on your gut instinct. And then the issue is, how do you properly deal with it after that, which is, what we tell people. And what you said, I love the description of the book. It's an actionable field guide, because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, when those of you listening get your hands on this, you're going to go, oh crap, where's this been my whole life? It really does. I got that sense. I was like, oh man, like this is just everything about this is just makes so much more sense. And I start thinking of things differently. And to your point, even now refining my belief this whole time about 2 ears and one mouth, use them proportionately. I'm thinking even now in different perspective of how I can bring more to the table when in a negotiation. But it's interesting because especially in the car industry, there's this sometimes black cloud that hangs over the industry as a whole because people don't like the negotiation process. Right. And so it kind of becomes this one-sided thing where it's, we know customer doesn't want to negotiate, and because we know that, we keep trying to come up with different things to say, different things to do, different things, but it's really just us doing all the talking to try and get in front of their apprehensiveness. You would suggest try and figure out how to turn that around. Let them do the talking, figure out how to open them up.
Yeah, absolutely. Get the other side talking. And people get apprehensive because they envision an argument, a fight, a battle, conflict. And this book and this style is really about getting on the same side with the person that you're interacting with. Because in point of fact, why are the two of you talking? You're talking because you're both faced with different aspects of the same problem. So in fact, a better outcome will come from a great collaboration. And as soon as you can transform your thinking from battle to collaboration, then that begins to transform how you approach it.
Why do we as organizations, though, I mean, what is it about us that causes us to just want to be kind of more in an offensive play than anything else?
Well, it's not just organizations, it's people. I mean, we're wired to be worried about combat. We're wired to be negative, which is going to cause us to think about combat. I mean, the wiring that's in our brain from the caveman days, most people have heard of the amygdala, and they refer to the amygdala hijack, or when you see red, or whatever any of these things are. The wiring that was given to us however many years ago we crawled out of the ocean and became a species was designed to keep us alive, and it had to be overly negative. That wiring is still there, when in fact we actually live in an abundant, positive world, but we can't get away from our caveman reactions.
Right. We're fixed beliefs and hardwiring.
Right. Which requires a relatively consistent but not complicated effort to overcome. And then you build the habit of consistently overcoming that wiring. Then in a short period of time, roughly 3 weeks of consistent application, then you overcome it.
And that goes back to the average amount of time it takes to make or break a habit?
Exactly. And there's some, now that we have neuroscience, there's some wiring explanation behind it. It's the number of times you fire a neural synapse to create a good solid wiring connection. And then it does require maintenance after that. It's like putting a rocket ship into orbit. There's not as much effort required to keep it in orbit, but there is some effort required or you fall out.
Sure. Now, this makes me, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about a couple of different things you've said. So being mindful of just human behavior, reading signs, reading body language, paying attention to, I guess, self-awareness, paying attention to what feelings you're getting or what you're picking up on. So there's that. You also mentioned Warren Buffett as it pertains to negotiations and creating a better deal, how he would sit and listen in order to extract all of the information or data that he needed to make good decisions or make a good deal happen. But what does that really look like? So if you're walking into a room where it's a business meeting, or you're walking into a hostage negotiation with a terrorist, I mean, is there a starting point? Is there a way for you to kind of manifest your expectations, or do you just kind of hope that by sitting down and listening, things will go your way?
Well, you want to demonstrate right off the bat that you're there to listen, and you want to extract information in a way that doesn't feel like you're extracting the information. And it's a little bit different approach. It's actually getting away from questions. Now I'm going to give you an opening line that you could use in a business deal. You could use in a discussion with your spouse. And I'm not drawing any analogies here, but you could use it with a terrorist as well. All right. No analogy between spouse and terrorist. Anybody who runs off in that direction, all I can say is that's on you. But imagine,
disclaimer.
Yeah, there's a disclaimer. Imagine this. If you say, seems like you've given this a lot of thought, who could you not say that to?
It even got me thinking. Seems like you've given. Who could you not say that to? Yeah.
Now that's
who could you not say that?
A very specifically designed statement, word for word. Each word is designed to have a specific type of impact on your brain and on your emotional intelligence overall. That statement is not going to cause you to put your guard up.
Right.
Which is step one. Now we're interacting. I'm interacting with you in a way that's not only is it not going to put your guard up, it's a great indicator that I'm actually interested in hearing what you have to say, which is going to begin to develop a working relationship. Right off the bat, your collaborative circuits are firing. You're feeling there's a potential collaboration here. You're not feeling judged in any way, shape, or form. You're not feeling like I'm conning you, because in no way, shape, or form am I agreeing or disagreeing. I'm actually displaying curiosity, which is people are drawn to genuine curiosity. For me, being curious about what your perspective is, again, it doesn't indicate, I'm not trying to say I'm your friend. I'm not trying to say I'm your enemy. I'm in the middle ground right in between, which is really where great deals are made, because there's tremendous authenticity there.
Interesting. And it's got me, I've just been taking notes ferociously, because you're right. As you were saying all of this, I'm like, there's really no way to dispute that you're on my terms.
Yeah.
Like you've just met me in the middle. Now, for those that haven't read the book yet, explain the concept of never split that. Like, what do you mean by never split the difference?
Okay. Splitting the difference is either trap or a circular death spiral. So let's go with the trap part to begin with. There's an old saying in negotiations, a person who offers to meet you in the middle is usually a poor judge of distance.
Okay, yeah.
So the cutthroat negotiators, the people that anchor high, let's say I want to pay $100 for something. And that's where I want to end up. You're asking $150, I want to pay $100. I'm going to say, look, I'll give you 50 or I'll walk away.
Right.
Now, if I wanted to pay $100 all along, we'll go back and forth a little bit. I'll make a show. I'll protest. I'll do the flinches. I'll do all that crazy stuff that they teach in some of those ridiculous seminars. And then I'll say, I tell you what, why don't we split the difference? I'll give you $100. And you'll feel gratified. You feel like it was fair. You'll feel like somehow we made a great deal together. And for me, it was a con all along. And this happens to us all the time because, the cutthroat negotiators typically will be in a company, and somebody that's not in the training session will seek me out in the cafeteria. And
Sure.
They'll say, hey, I hear you're here, and I hear you're teaching people that, don't win-win and don't split the difference. And they'll say, I do win-win negotiations, and I split the difference all the time. And I'll say, and now I'm smelling this guy's a shark. I already know it. And I'll go,
Sure.
yeah, well, the negotiator offers to meet you in the middle is usually a poor judge of distance. And they'll act like I caught them with their hand in the cookie jar. And I go, yeah, I always just ask for about twice as much as I want so that I can offer to split the difference, say it's a win-win, and I get what I want and walk away. It's a complete con.
Right.
So that's problem one, was split the difference. Problem two, split the difference. Danny Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in 2002 for something called prospect theory. Nobel Prize in behavioral economics, because this is how all human beings are wired. All human beings, ALL. Doesn't matter if you're African, Asian, Latino, Western European, Arctic, Eskimo. It doesn't matter.
Right.
A loss thinks twice as much as an equivalent gain. And actually, which means if you lose $5, you're going to feel like you gave up 10. And I remember watching an interview that Professor Kahneman gave at one point in time. And he said, Amos and I, when we thought this up, it's not twice as much. It's 5 times as much. We just wanted fewer arguments from our colleagues, so we lowered the number to twice as much. So it's actually more than that. What does that mean? If we meet in the middle, I'm not going to feel that I met you in the middle. My skewed version, because I'm a human being, is that I gave up twice as much as I got, even if it was a complete, total exchange of value. Now, because I'm going to feel like I gave up double what I actually gave up, I'm going to be resentful and spiteful, and I'm going to try and pay you back. Revenge is a dish best served cold, right? I'm going to wait for my opportunity to pay you back. Now, as soon as I pay you back, you're going to feel stung. What was fair about that? What are you doing? What are you doing reneging on the deal? What are you doing going sideways? Now, the other side's mad, and that's why it becomes a death spiral. There was this, there's an old cartoon about a husband and a wife. It was called The Lockhorns. Somebody shared that with me just a couple of weeks ago. And it's from like the 1970s. I don't know. But the caption was a husband and wife are talking, and the husband says, "Why don't we split the difference? Then we'll both be unhappy."
Yeah, right. Lose times 4.
Yeah. And then what happens with lose? What happens to your long-term business relationships? What happens with your desire to collaborate with that person when the opportunities come up? Because if you dealt with somebody once, they're in your environment, they're in your universe, they're in your monetary ecosystem. You're going to deal with them again. You're going to see them again.
And it's funny too, because as you say that, I can think of individuals who I'm just like, man, I tried forever to get into their books, and now I wish they'd just lose my phone number. Yeah. And it's really that kind of scenario where I go, oh man, and it would be very difficult at this point in time for them to shift the perception that I have of them based on how they dealt with me, whether it was too forceful, whether it was this con essentially that they were trying to get me to do things they wanted, and meeting in the middle and all this, and it wasn't really a reality at all.
Yeah, and that residue just doesn't go away, does it?
No, it doesn't. I mean, even after, and I'll be totally honest, some of them have had their come to Jesus and I've turned my life to God and all these sorts of things. And there's still this piece of me that's just like, but have you?
Yeah.
Have you? And so I agree with you. The residue there is pretty insane. And so, I love what you're saying about, and you talk about this in the book, right? So, right back to the word track that you gave us of basically, how do you essentially say it? It's like, I love the word tactical. I don't know why, but it's basically tactical empathy.
Yeah, exactly.
Just the idea of, like you said, I'm not agreeing with you. I'm not necessarily agreeing with you, and I'm not necessarily on your side, but just displaying genuine curiosity means that I'm positioning myself to not have to con you into getting my way, because then that means I won and you lost, essentially.
Right. And there's two problems with that approach, which a lot of people do. Con, number one, the con is going to wear off and they're going to wake up. My way, they're going to resent that, and so if it's not a collaborative interaction where they contributed, they got no ownership. They got no ownership. It's your way, and they're going to resent it. So, and if I may go back to a little bit, because I'm really happy that you picked up on the word tactical, and the real reason that we put that in there as part of our definition is nearly every negotiation book out there was written before we actually knew how the brain worked via neuroscience. Like the neuroscience data that we have now is not that old. We started getting solid neuroscience data probably about 2012, 2010, relatively recently, where we can see how the brain actually works. And our application of this thing called empathy, what is this thing, empathy, is based on we know how the brain works. And if you know how it works, if you've been given a roadmap to not just the interplay of emotions and thinking, but how to dial certain things up and dial certain things down, principally dialing down negativity, let's use it tactically. If we understand how it works, let's just use our understanding. And that's why we use the word tactical.
And it's in that empathy, because I feel like sometimes we maybe misappropriate how empathy, what empathy is.
Yes, exactly.
We think it's this like subservient. Oh, I'm empathizing with. Oh, I understand. That's maybe I'm just the weird one, but that's kind of the way it always feels like. You hear a lot of business leaders on stage and they're like, empathy wins the day, and then you hear them explain empathy, and you're like, you basically described sympathy.
Yeah.
But empathy. So as it pertains to you in your field, from your vantage point, what really is empathy? And because I mean, it really is basically in the word track you gave us as it pertains to the book, that's an empathetic play, but it's for a reason.
Yeah, well, empathy is the demonstration of understanding. In particular, aspects of that understanding that might be negative towards us. You begin to look fearless when you acknowledge the negativity towards you. It's the operational implementation of Covey's guidance from way back, Stephen Covey, seek first to understand, then be understood.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so it's not just understanding, but demonstrating what you perceive that understanding to be. And so that's a 2 mm shift. It's a demonstration of understanding. Which means there's no attachment, there's no judgment, there's no agreement, there's no disagreement. I can understand where you're coming from without agreeing or disagreeing. Daniel Goleman wrote a book called Focus, I think it's either 2012 or 2009. And in one of his chapters, and Goleman, of course, the guy who coined the phrase of emotional intelligence, one of his chapters called the empathy triad, the 3 types of empathy, and he defines one type as cognitive empathy, which is just darn close to exactly what we're talking about here. And it's just a complete and total understanding of where someone is coming from, not adopting their emotions in any way, shape, or form, but being completely aware of them. You don't have to adopt them to be aware of them. And if you can do that, then empathy becomes an unlimited skill.
Which is it's so valuable, especially in today's, at least North America's social climate, where you're either right or you're wrong, and there's not even a middle. There's not even any place for us to meet on common ground. There's just, you are nuts or you're crazy, and we have this big back and forth, where what you're saying is basically, and I can only imagine, I can't even imagine some of the situations that you found yourself in negotiating things as an FBI agent, where if you were to absorb their feeling and start to agree with what they were feeling, you'd be a pretty messed up dude.
Yeah, it's just insane. It's an insane approach to try to absorb and agree.
Yeah, and that's where I think the misunderstanding of empathy comes, because they go, "Oh, you're an empath. You can absorb, what people are feeling." But what you're saying is, no, I can show empathy by demonstrating that I understand where you're coming from without actually absorbing the feeling or adopting or converting to your way of belief.
Right. Complete and total awareness does not mean that you have to shoulder. You have to be aware of it. I mean, different analogies help people get it in different ways. I first learned this approach when I volunteered on a crisis hotline back in the 1990s. And they told us back then, if somebody's in quicksand, you don't help them by getting into the quicksand with them.
Right. Yeah.
And the guy in quicksand, if he wants out of the quicksand, he don't want you jumping in with him. That doesn't do him any good. Now we're both in quicksand. Now we're both screwed. Get back out of here and throw me a rope. Pull me out, but don't jump in here with me. It doesn't help me.
Right. So now you're in a negotiation, and you want to make a deal happen. Obviously, you understand the implications from the business side. Like, hey, if we can make a deal happen, this is positive. If we can make a deal happen, or the customer's going, of course, if we can make a deal happen, I get what I want as well. But you talk about that there are different words that can be used to make the negotiations go much more smoothly, or in order to effectively communicate with the other party. You talk about fair.
The F word, the F bomb.
Yeah, the F bomb, the negotiation F bomb. Why is that? Like, what is it about that word that makes it so powerful?
Well, first of all, it comes up in every negotiation. I mean, it just comes up all the time. I love when I run across people who are seasoned negotiators. I'm sitting at breakfast yesterday with a Hollywood insider who's been here for a long time, has made his bones, and has a great reputation. If nothing else, with all the bad reputations in Hollywood, this guy is got a great reputation for dealing with people, quote, fairly. And we're sitting at breakfast just getting to know each other, and we talk about negotiations, and he says, my side knows that when I say this is unfair, we are just about to walk out of the room. And I just remember thinking like, yeah, man, I'm telling you what, if you're telling me in deals for, $100 million movies, you're dropping the F-bomb, then everybody does. So,
Right.
All right. So your original question, what does that mean? If I say I just want what's fair, I'm accusing you of being unfair.
Sure.
And that jabs people instantly. It's what my friends Sheila Heen and Doug Stone would refer to in their book, this difficult conversations. It causes an identity quake. It can rattle us. So, and people throw out, saying this is unfair. I just want what's fair. One of two ways. Intentionally, it's so powerful, it knocks people off their feet, and often, it's like strategic umbrage, false anger. I can get my way with you in this deal, and it will bother you for a very long time. And of course, I'll pay for it. So I can do it to manipulate you, or some people, when they've been pushed too far and they're trying to deal honestly and they just don't know what's wrong, they will drop the F-bomb. And it's a really bad sign because they feel misused by you. So you've got to really be aware of when it's being used and who's using it, and line up as to, do they really feel like I'm cheating them? Because I got to make some adjustments if they do feel that way, or are they trying to cut my throat? You got to know which one of those two they are.
Right. And so because I even notice, and I'm like slapping myself. I don't say it all the time, but I do say it on occasion. And now, after I've learned about this, I go, oh man, there's probably way better words I could have, or better terms that I could have expressed myself in than just like implying, I'm going to be fair now, but I wasn't being fair before.
There's all sorts of implications like that. Yeah, exactly. When you start getting into it, what you're implying and the other side's picking up is exactly right.
A couple of more questions for you, kind of continuing down this thought. Most deals, especially as it pertains to business, and as car dealers are thinking about this, they're probably, they're listening and they're going, well, Michael, okay, well, if I don't speak in monetary terms and what's fair and all these sorts of things, how can I make a deal happen if I'm to kind of pivot around this in a more, let's call it, creative way without necessarily talking in monetary terms or whatnot?
Most people just want to be heard. So whatever that percentage is, whether it's 1% or whether it's 90%,
sure,
my money is important enough to me that I'm not going to part with any of it if I can preserve it by hearing the other side out. That's why it's my first move. That's the cheapest thing I can do. My money's too important to me. Plus, if I'm throwing money at the problem, if I'm making monetary moves, concessions, when the other side just wants to be heard, then I'm applying the wrong medicine. So they're still going to be unhappy, and it's still going to not bear well for me long term. People want to trust the other side. Take the word trust out, put in the word predictable. Become predictable for the other side. Become steady, become reliable. Don't make them wonder what they're getting in the exchange. That'll save you dollars. I mean, great negotiation skills are really for people that want to stop wasting their money, trying to throw money at solutions when money wasn't called for in the first place. My money's important enough to me. I like keeping it in my bank account.
Sure. And so the assumption, most of us assume, well, this is a sales deal or this is a business transaction or some sort of something where there will be benefit. Let's just automatically go to money because we assume that's the thing people care about most, when it does for some, like you're saying, and it may not for others. Yeah,
it's a lazy move. I mean, it's just really lazy. And the percentage of the time when it doesn't actually solve the problem is high enough that I want to make sure I'm using the right solution.
Yeah, I love it. Last question for you before we wind this thing down. I've absolutely loved this conversation. You talk about I mean, this all really comes down to communication. Whether it's looking somebody in the eye, whether it's sensing what they're getting at, or understanding their feelings, or any of these things. You talk about how most communication is nonverbal. And so anybody in this kind of position of, I guess, I don't know the right words to use, controlling the negotiation or being in charge of or being a steward of the negotiation, you talk about how they should develop the ability to understand or interpret body language, but not just body language, also tone of voice. How do you do that? What should you be looking for?
Well,
because we hear this all the time. It sounds cool.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm going to interpret body language. I wouldn't even know the first thing about what I should be looking for.
All right. So the hack is, it's when are things out of line? This is one of the things that I talked about in my TED Talk. A polygraph doesn't look for all your different tells. A polygrapher puts you on the box and asks you a series of control questions so they can see what you look like when you're telling the truth. Like, you might have 7 ways you lie, but you got one way you tell the truth. If you tell the truth, you got one way you tell the truth. And then, of course, if you don't tell the truth, you're never in alignment consistently on truth questions. And you know that the person is deceptive all the time. That's what that means. So you sit down in a polygraph, they say, what's your name? What day is it? Where are you? What'd you have for breakfast? All questions that in advance we know what the answers are, and I want to see what you're going to look like when you tell the truth. Then when we move forward, all I got to know is that you're out of alignment. Now, you'll pick this up in your individual interactions. That's why, we want to go to dinner with somebody. We want to have social conversations. Hey, how many kids you got? Where are they in school? This social interactions is also our subconscious mind, which is a ridiculously powerful computer, is picking up what they look like when they're being genuine. I just got one son. He's 33, he works in my business. Whatever the answer might be. You're starting to get a gut instinct of what I look like when I'm being genuine. Now, you don't have to know what all the different ways I might be deceptive, but the minute I come out of that, you're gonna start to get a funny feeling. You're gonna start to wonder. Most people, I got to give them the benefit of the doubt. It's me. I need another cup of coffee, or whatever it is. But in point of fact, they've come out of their truth alignment. So you don't have to learn all the body language. You just got to let the supercomputer that is your intuition begin to pick up the data. And then once you understand it, also that it's an issue of alignment, then when they're out of line, there's a problem.
I'm Michael Cirillo, and you've been listening to the Dealer Playbook Podcast. If you haven't yet, please click the subscribe button wherever you're listening right now. Leave a rating or review and share it with a colleague. Thanks for listening.